Today I'm going to be analysing a dining table that I got from Oak Furnitureland and showing you how it's actually made and some of the tricks that they use to make it more substantial than it is. Yeah, that's a lot of filler. What's up woodworkers, Ben here, and for those of you who haven't come across them, Oak Furnitureland is a company based here in the UK that sells, well, oak furniture. But their prices are surprisingly low when compared to buying the oak yourself and making it at home, which makes it really difficult to price up projects that you're making for yourself, especially if you have paying clients who compare it to the mass market stuff. So why is this, and how does it compare to methods you might use to make it yourself? Well, I've got this old dining table that I'm replacing with a homemade one. And before I sell this one on, I thought I'd do an analysis of how it's been made so that we can see how it differs from one you might make yourself. Okay, so let's start with the table top. And upon first glance, it seems to be a fairly chunky and substantial top. But upon closer inspection, you can see that the top itself is actually only 15mm thick. And then it just has a side piece attached underneath to give the top a chunky look. This is a pretty clever idea. It means that you don't need really thick wood to give it that chunky look, which is a useful concept when making your own DIY projects. Obviously, it's absolutely normal for people like us to get down on our hands and knees and crawl around furniture showrooms just to see how it's made, right? Is it? But to normal people, the way that this is built could be somewhat misleading. Now, to make a tabletop, you'd normally use boards of the same width to create a uniform look. For instance, I'm using 10 boards at 105mm wide to create my 1 meter wide tabletop, because once I've edge jointed each one, I should be left with around 100mm per board. However, this tabletop doesn't use a uniform width for the boards, and it actually seems to have just used all sorts of random widths of board. Don't they, Molly? Yes! The joints are pretty tight, to be fair, on it, but they haven't taken the time to cut all the boards down to the same width. You've got 122mm, 77mm, 126mm, 50mm, 120mm, 133mm, and 126mm. And you can see they haven't picked up nice, neat, uniform boards with the same grain patterns and the same colours. They're a bit all over the place. There's also a bunch of filled nail holes running along the edges and the ends of the top. It would appear that this is what's holding it on, but we'll find out more as we look underneath. One other thing that I've noticed as I've paid more attention to this table is how much filler is being used. You can see some fairly big chunks here. Right, let's take a cheeky peek underneath and see what dirty little secrets it's got. So we can see the underside of the tabletop here, and the first thing that caught my eye were the relief cuts here that run along the underside of the table. This is a known practice to prevent cupping, but shouldn't really be a problem if the boards were properly dried before being used. That being said, it doesn't hurt to put them in as it doesn't affect the face side of the tabletop. You can see here that there's this central support brace across the middle. This appears to just be glued into the underside of the top. And then it's got these side pieces which are separate and screwed in with slots in the brace pieces to allow for the wood movement. But then they've gone and nailed all of these pieces in at the ends. You can even see the nails here, and one's even completely missed. Molly gave the table a good check over and can in fact confirm that yes, it's made of wood. Usually you'd expect some sort of tabletop fasteners here, such as Z-clips, figure 8 fasteners or hardwood buttons, but there's none of these here, so I can only assume that the top is simply glued and nailed in place based on those filled holes we saw on the top. I guess they weren't overly concerned with wood movement, and to be fair, we have had this table for a few years now and it's not showed any signs of cracking across the top. Maybe because the top boards are too thin, or maybe because they've got these relief cuts underneath, or maybe we're just lucky. Who knows? Okay, let's move on to the legs. Again, at first glance, these look like chunky legs that you'd assume are made of solid wood, like the 80mm by 80mm oak legs I'm going to use for my new dining table. But upon closer inspection, it becomes clear that these are actually just made up of 4 thinner boards glued together to give the appearance of thicker legs. It would appear that the thinner outer pieces are wrapped around a uglier chunk of wood in the middle, and even that didn't fit, so they've got a shim of thinner wood just to fill it all out. This method definitely works and no doubt keeps the cost down, but I can see how people could be misled again into thinking they're buying chunky, solid wood legs as opposed to ones made from thinner boards. The legs are attached using a 45-degree piece that's bolted into the legs themselves and then attached to the table skirts here. This is fairly common practice to add stability from racking from side to side. These have come loose recently, but haven't really caused an issue for us in the time we've had it. It does mean that it can ship flat pack though. Look, ultimately, if you buy from these big companies, then you should expect this type of mass-produced, budget-friendly workmanship. But I do think that this skews the general expectation when it comes to prices of furniture. To build this type of table as a small hobbyist, then you can expect to pay a lot more than the finished table just for the materials. Now, would your table be made of better quality wood? Probably. And would it be made in a higher quality way? Well, even if you went with fairly basic pocket holes and DIY methods, then I think you could make a better table than this with less filler, that's for sure. Ultimately, this type of thing boils down to whether you want to make a table versus the convenience of having one ready-made. The problem comes when you're making things like this to sell. You need to quickly weed out the buyers who are thinking you can do a cheaper version of the one they've seen, unless they want it out of cheap pine and basic construction materials. And you need to find the customers that understand quality, time and effort that goes into a handmade product versus something mass produced. What do you think? Is it worth making your own table or just buying one and moving on with your life? If you're thinking of making your own table, then I've got a video right here that's worth watching next. And I'll see you on the next one.